Welcome in to Outkick the Show. I am your fearless leader, Clay Travis, coming a little bit late to you today. I hope that all of you are having a fantastic Thursday, and I hope that you will listen tomorrow to Outkick the coverage. Outkick the Show is brought to you by Oddshark. Go to Oddshark for all your gambling and informational related needs. As well, go to the home loan expert if you have a mortgage and it's not in the 2% ratio. If you need to go out and get pre-qualified, if you need to go ahead and want to buy a home, get hooked up now. Make sure that you do it, and you will be well on your way to saving a bundle. Also, if you need to refi, again, if your rate is outside the twos, get hooked up right now by going to thehomeloanexpert.com. If you sign up with them, then you can get an Outkick VIP package. All right, let's dive into a bunch of different stories. Again, I'm going to hit the rundown here. NFL protests giving the NFL a bad name, and it's awful for business. Hugh Hefner, rest in peace. The fake CNN outrage over me saying I love the First Amendment and boobs is brought into stark relief, no pun intended there, given the way that they are covering Hugh Hefner's death, as well as college basketball scandal spreading. I don't buy into the idea that this is an easy-to-place fraud charge. I will discuss all of that, but I want to start with something interesting. I've talked a lot about why I think the NFL protest is complete crap and why I believe that it has no basis in reality. Remember, Colin Kaepernick said he was protesting the NFL, the national anthem, because he was specifically not standing for the national anthem for the flag because of the oppression of black people in the United States. Okay, this is, I think, pretty fantastic. This is pretty interesting. The FBI released data in 2016 that you are on 2016 crimes this week, and I bet you're not going to hear this data anywhere else. So I want you to listen up closely. Again, this is direct from the FBI. All right. If you're focused on the oppression of black people and the murder of black people, because you're Colin Kaepernick, there have been 10 unarmed black people shot and killed by police so far this year in 2017. It's about one a month. You are more likely to leave your house if you are unarmed and be killed by bees, wasps, or hornets in this country than you are by a police officer. You are 5 times as likely to be struck and killed by a train if you leave your house this year as you are unarmed, as you are to be killed by a police officer. So, these are amazing stats, all right? This past year, there were 7,881 victims of murder who were black. That is, black people who were killed. 7,881. Do you know how many of those black people who were killed by white people? Do you know how many of those were white people killing black people? There were 243 white people who murdered black people in this country this year. That means that 97% of all black murders had absolutely nothing to do with white people at all. I want you to think about this for a sec. Black Lives Matter is out there protesting like crazy. Each of the past 2 years, 900 new black murder victims have arisen, and almost all of them have been killed by other black people. So I would ask you this question. Why is no one in the social justice warrior community who is so obsessed with racism pointing out that in this past year, white people had absolutely nothing to do with 97% of black murders in this country? There were 7,881 black murder victims last year, 2016. Murder rate went up 20% the past 2 years. Only 243 of them were involved with white people. That's a pretty unbelievable statistic. 97% of all black murders have absolutely nothing to do with white people. And if you go even any further, you're talking about white police officers killing black people. You're talking about even fewer percentage of that, like 99% of all murders and shootings have nothing to do with white people. All right? These are actual facts. Why do I share them? Because I think that they matter and because nobody else is sharing them. All right? Here's another stat for you. This blew my mind. Police, all right, are you ready? Police are 18 and a half in 2016. Police were 18 and a half times more likely to be killed by black people than they were to shoot a black person. Think about that for a minute. Police, 18 and a half times more likely to be killed by black people as they were to shoot a black person. Again, these are actual facts that the NFL protesters should know. They don't because the media won't cover it, but that is an unbelievable data point. This is direct from the FBI in 2016. I care about facts. People are going to say, oh, Clay Travis, you're racist for sharing those facts. That is an indisputable fact. All right, again, I'm going to give these to you one more time. 7,881 black people were murdered in 2016, last year. 243 of them were white people murdering black people. So 97% of all black murders had nothing to do with white people in this country. So if you are Black Lives Matter and you're running around and you're the NFL and you are arguing that you want to be in the business of protesting and you're so upset, I want you to have actual data. 97% of all black murders had nothing to do with white people at all this past year in 2016. So while everybody out there is running around obsessed with this, like, oh my God, America's fundamentally racist, Black Lives Matter, everything else, if black lives really matter, then you should focus on black people not killing black people. That's the focus. Shouldn't be the police, shouldn't be white people, shouldn't be racism. It should be, hey, black people, don't kill each other. That should be the focus if your Black Lives Matter. Instead, Black Lives Matter is actually focused on a tiny, tiny percentage of the overall story. All right? Think about how crazy that is. Think about how crazy those statistics are out there. And, gonna have to block some guy. I missed the I'm not gonna block him. Somebody said, I missed the pre-Trump version of you. When did you, so you missed the version of me that wasn't paying a lot of attention to statistics? The one that wasn't always citing facts and pointing out how unbelievably biased the media was in the way that it covered things? That's the truth. So you're upset that I stated facts. I mean, that's what we kind of have entered this universe, right? Isn't blocking people suppressing free speech? You don't have free speech on my show. Again, goddamn. Some of you are so fucking stupid when it comes to the First Amendment. If you show up at my house and you have a sign and you stand in my front yard, you don't have the right to stand in front of my yard, in my yard, on my property, and make a protest, all right? You don't have a right to show up and comment on my show. That's not the fucking First Amendment. I'm not the government. Not the government yet. I might be a senator one day. You don't have the right to show up and just comment if I don't want you to comment. This is my fucking show. The First Amendment. Like, let me take a step back, all right? I am so sick of all the ignoramuses out there arguing First Amendment when they don't fucking understand what the First Amendment does, all right? The First Amendment deals with governmental speech. You do not have a right to go to your work and scream whatever you want and then argue that you can't be fired because of the First Amendment. If you show up and protest on the job, if you're at Walmart, if you are at FedEx, if you are at UPS, or if you are at McDonald's, you will get fired. That's the thing about this protest that I think is missing everybody. 99.99% of people who show up at work and protest do not have First Amendment rights and would be fired. You have the First Amendment right to say whatever you want, but you can't expect not to be fired for it. Now, the government can't take away your right to vote because you said something, all right? The government can't disallow you to come out and show up on the street corner in a public market and say whatever you want. But Jesus Christ, some of you motherfuckers are so stupid. You don't have the right to show up in my comment section saying stupid stuff and not get blocked. That has nothing to do with the First Amendment. You don't even have a right to call into my radio show and get on the air. Now, I let you do it because we try to have robust debates, for instance, on the radio, but there's absolutely no First Amendment right to that. It isn't involved at all. My issue, when I say I'm a First Amendment absolutist, is that there is no way on earth, in my opinion, that a company like ESPN or MSESPN, as I have them on the shirt here, should be firing Curt Schilling for his conservative speech and allowing Jemele Hill to make her liberal speech. My issue is not that ESPN doesn't have the right to fire people. They certainly do. It's that they shouldn't be firing people based on what their political speech is. And you know what? I've actually got a pretty fascinating data point for you on that. One of you did research for me. And by the way, you guys send me a lot of awesome stuff. You guys send me a lot of really awesome stuff. I thought this was pretty interesting. And I'm kind of fascinated by it. One of you looked up the ESPN employee contributions in 2016. Mike, and I don't know if he wants his last name to be used, Mike L. Ran a quick search on the FEC website, Federal Election Commission website. Less than 1% of ESPN employee contributions in 2016 went to Donald Trump. And then he's got a full breakdown of all the contributions at ESPN. Less than 1% went to President Donald Trump. Does that sound like 99% of all money was directed against Donald Trump inside of ESPN? Does that sound like a ideological open space there? Does that sound like a place that gives you a unbelievable opening for every possible belief, right? Half of the American population voted for Donald Trump. 99% of ESPN contributions in 2016 went to ensure that Donald Trump was not elected president. Does that sound like an ideologically diverse workplace to you? 81% of the money, by the way, went to Hillary Clinton. And a small minority, there were other people who got money as well, but I thought that was pretty fantastic. Bernie Sanders was the second largest guy in terms of the amount of support he got. So that's a pretty amazing stat. 99% went against him. That is, again, one of you sending me that info. I think that's pretty fascinating. Okay, so I am talking about the protest and why they make no sense. Other news that I broke today. There is starting to be a lot of backlash in a corporate community against the NFL protest. At closer to home for me, Nashville Ford dealers have pulled DeMarco Murray's ads and his association with the Ford dealership. Now, DeMarco Murray just said in the locker room that my report was not true. It is 100% true that DeMarco Murray of the Tennessee Titans has had his affiliation with Ford locally pulled. He said it's not true. He's wrong. So that is the truth. It's starting to happen elsewhere, and there are a lot of interesting angles here to consume. Yesterday I made the analogy, and I'm probably going to write on this at some point. Yeah, and you're right. Some of you are saying he probably doesn't even know. You may be right. He's either lying or he doesn't know. One of those two things. But after the Titans didn't come out for the national anthem, there's a lot of unhappiness here locally, and it's certainly an unhappiness that's reflected across the entire scope of the country. So it's a bad look for the NFL. The analogy that I drew was with the Dixie Chicks. If you listen to the show this morning, the Dixie Chicks back in 2003 went overseas and said they didn't respect Donald Trump and wished he wasn't from Texas. And then their business collapsed because their audience could not believe that they went and turned their back to George W. Bush. And I think that's what's going on right now. George W. Bush. If you walk into an NFL football stadium or a college football stadium, the majority of the fans in there voted for Donald Trump. And I don't know whether the players are clueless. Did you see where Delaney Walker said he didn't care if fans showed up, if they were upset by the protest? This is bad business. This is really bad business. And I think it's going to turn into a mess for the NFL if it hasn't already. We'll see what happens tonight. But advertising dollars are going to start to come off. Tens of thousands of people have canceled their NFL Sunday ticket. A lot of you have made the decision that you're not going to buy gear anymore, or even that you're not going to use your tickets, that you're not going to go to the stadium and spend money. These athletes don't understand where their money came from. And that's because most of them aren't businessmen. They think like employees. Most people, honestly, most people in life don't think like owners. They think like employees. And one thing that I would encourage you guys to do is think like owners, don't think like employees. If you think like an owner, then you understand the way that business works and you make smart strategic decisions. If you think like an employee, then you're always happy just to have a check coming. Every single person in America should try to think like an owner. Most players don't think like owners, all right? If you thought like an owner, you would not be trying to alienate your base, which is Trump voters, Republicans are football fans. If you think about this, it makes sense. Left-wingers are not football fans. College football fans vote Republican. You walk into a college football stadium, and that audience, no matter where you are, voted for Donald Trump. Everywhere in the SEC, everywhere in the Big 12, everywhere in the Big 10, that is a Donald Trump audience. And most of those places also with the NFL are Donald Trump audiences. All right? And so as a result, it's bad business to alienate your core audience. Here's something else. I circle back around on the First Amendment. A lot of people who advocate for the First Amendment for the players don't understand that the First Amendment also applies to the response. When I say I'm a First Amendment absolutist, that means that I have my opinion, but I also welcome you in the marketplace of ideas to argue your opinion. The fans choosing to cancel the NFL Sunday ticket and rejecting the protest of the NFL players is an exact response to the players. If you support the players' right to protest, then you also have to support the fan and sponsor right to reject that protest and counteract their speech with their own speech. And I don't understand how people don't follow that. They're like, oh, these people responding are snowflakes. And I'm like, really? They actually have the courage of their convictions. I don't support the protest, but I like the NFL too much to give it up, right? I'm not going to stop watching the NFL because I care too much about whether my team wins. Now, and also, look, I've got a national sports talk radio show. I got to watch every game anyway. But it's amazing to me that the same people who say, the players have a right to speak, get upset when the fans push back and disagree with what the players are saying. That's the truth in general. Now, I appreciate people who have the courage of their convictions. I'm not a protesting dude, right? By and large, I respect the fact that lots of people disagree with me, all right, every single day. But I'm not the kind of guy who's going to say, what I disagree with in general is, I disagree when people take the next step and say, I disagree that this exists and it shouldn't exist anymore, right? That's my big distinction. I think you're perfectly within your rights to say, I'm not going to support this, I'm not going to buy it. Where I think First Amendment, I'm stopping my First Amendment absolutism, is when you say, I don't like this and it shouldn't exist anymore. I used to get that all the time with my show before people just gave up because we were too popular. People used to come on all the time and they would say, did you see what Clay Travis wrote at Outkick? He shouldn't be an employee anymore. He shouldn't be able to work at Fox Sports. He shouldn't be able to work at Fan House or Deadspin or wherever else, which is why I've started to make fun of it, right? Outkick needs to fire Clay Travis. I stop with, I don't like somebody, that's your right. Don't read them, don't listen to them, don't pay attention to them. Once you try to silence them, which is what the left wing tries to do nowadays, I disagree with it. But if you don't want to spend your money on the NFL, or if you don't want to watch the NFL, that's perfectly within your rights. There are all sorts of things going on every day that I don't take the time to watch because I don't have the time to watch them, right? I got 3 kids. I got like 20 jobs. Every day for me is a sprint. I wake up at 4 a.m. and I go hard every day till like 10:30 or 11, theoretically, right? I'm sleeping like 5 hours a night. That's how tired I am, all right? So if you don't like it, that's fine, but don't try and actually go out and shut somebody down. Somebody says, so how are they supposed to protest? Well, you're supposed to protest in a way that doesn't alienate people that you're ostensibly trying to get to support you. All right? Don't alienate people by not standing for the national anthem. Don't protest on your job. You're a famous athlete. You have an ability to advocate for things that you agree or disagree with. But you don't have the right to do it on the field. And you certainly don't have the right to do it on the field during the national anthem. Like, think about this. I always try to, if you watch the show regularly, again, I'm Clay Travis, this is Outkick the Coverage, I always try to take a step back and analyze things, right? Like I try to get bigger picture, like think about it in a larger context, all right? If you protest, what's your goal in theory? When you protest, you are trying to change something, right? In theory, you are upset with the way the world is and you are trying to change it to something else. If you decide to protest, what does that mean that you're going to need? Allies. Because the reason why the situation exists as it is in a democracy is because a majority does not agree with you about your situation. So the number one thing when you protest that you want is you want something to change. Otherwise, the protest doesn't make any sense. And number two, and by the way, that's my argument here. There's absolutely no goal of any of this protest. We don't even know why it's going on, all right? But number one, you want something to change. Number two, you need allies to make that change, because otherwise you don't have the majority. So if you are trying to appeal to people who don't otherwise agree with you, the way that you get allies is by doing something that appeals to people who don't currently agree with you. And if you're trying to appeal to people that don't currently agree with you, you need to do things, this is not a newsflash, that they don't disagree with, all right? There may be a lot of people out there who would support the idea of equality, right? Whatever that means, right? Well, we want to be equal. Or you're in the NFL, actually. You're totally unequal, but whatever. You want to be equal, okay? If that is your goal, then you need allies. And you are alienating way more people on your side than you are actually persuading, right? That is the truth. So you are making a bad decision. So people say, how should they protest? I don't know, but I'm certain that they shouldn't do it on the field in their uniform in a way that guarantees that the majority of the American population disagrees with them. Because what it actually does is end up hurting your side. That's the truth of the matter. All right, Hugh Hefner. Did you guys see, this is amazing, the way that CNN has been covering the death of Hugh Hefner, the original First Amendment and boobs spokesperson? CNN got all triggered when I said I liked the First Amendment and boobs. They have, for the last 24 hours, been constantly covering Hugh Hefner, running B-roll of him surrounded by women in skimpy attire, flashing their boobs everywhere. So there's no telling how that chick, Brooke Baldwin, who said B-O-O-B-S and was so offended by my using the word boobs while talking to a woman, has been able at all to finish today's show. She must be curled up in the fetal position, perpetually triggered. Complete and total hypocrites at CNN. They have spent over 24 hours praising Hugh Hefner, which I don't disagree with, by the way. I'm a First Amendment absolutist. I believe everything that Hugh Hefner stood for. He's the original First Amendment and boobs. I am his linear descendant. But how many of these fucking losers at CNN are curled up in the fetal position, totally beaten down by the idea that that is something that is unacceptable? It's amazing. It's amazing to think about. All right, and finally, any questions about Hugh Hefner or the CNN situation? Hugh Hefner was the man. I absolutely love him. One of the great regrets of my life is that I never got to go to a party at the Playboy Mansion. I wanted to go to a party at the Playboy Mansion and be able to meet Hugh Hefner at some point. I wish I had done that. I wasn't ever able to do it. I have not ever met him, and obviously I never will meet him now. But I am in love with him, and so in a non-homoerotic way. I wish that I had had the opportunity to meet him at some point. He's a brilliant businessman. He has also advanced, to a great extent, the First Amendment beyond where most would ever have been able to take it. And I said this on the radio show this morning. As I have aged, what I have come to admire more than anything else is balls. Like just having fearlessness, whether you're a guy or a girl, having the fearlessness and the courage of your convictions to make a decision that you believe in, right? And roll with it and not worry about the critics and not worry about the consequences. Just be sure you're right. Like it's one of my favorite lines ever. Davy Crockett, famous Tennessean, used to say, be sure you're right and then go ahead. And that's kind of what I do. That was his mantra. Be sure you're right and then go ahead. And I spend a lot of time before I give any opinion thinking about everything, thinking about every aspect of my story, my opinions. And then when I'm sure I'm right, I go ahead with it. And I don't backpedal and I don't stop and I go straight ahead and tell you exactly what I think. I do it on the radio show. I do it on this show. I do it on the website. And there's a lot of benefit to that. There's a lot of truth to that. Most people don't do that. Most people are afraid to tell you exactly what they think. Most people stop short. If you talk to not in a good way, like when you're trying to touch a girl's boobs in a car, like in Seinfeld, you talk to football players, they talk about guys who play downhill. They talk about guys who come down the field and play downhill and don't like slow down at all the way through it. Well, I try to do what I do playing downhill. I don't slow up. I don't take short steps. I come straight to you every single day with my opinions. And it is interesting that Hugh Hefner dying about a week after I went on CNN and said what I did about the First Amendment and boobs. It's interesting because I see him as kind of someone out there that they admire for that reason. Same thing with Howard Stern. I believe 100% that those guys are my idols, and I think that I am the next in that iteration, right? I'm 38 years old now. For the next 20 years, as our platform continues to explode, and by the way, Outkick is exploding, I think that I'm the guy who's going to take the baton from those guys over the next 20 and 25 years. And a lot of you are a lot younger than me. Maybe one day one of you guys will be coming up and taking the baton from me. And I mean, in all seriousness, when I look at the way that history moves, I look at a guy like Hugh Hefner, I look at a guy like Howard Stern in the media, and they are the people that I would aspire to be in my career. So I'm 38 now. I feel like I got a good 25 years. In 25 years, I'll be, 63, which in this day and age is not that old. But the next generation or so of Outkick is going to be downright dominant, because in the last 12 years, or basically, I've been building to this point. And I said, Politico's writing an article about me. I don't know when it's going to go up. They're doing a huge profile. But as part of that interview, I said, look, I think Outkick is the most influential voice in sports media. And I don't think that's an exaggeration. I don't think that's being cocky. I mean, I think if you saw the people who read this site, if you saw who we interact with, we're the most influential sports media site out there in terms of actually changing opinions, in terms of actually directing stories. And I believe that's true. And so it's only going to grow over the next 20 years. So that's 100% going to happen going forward. Finally, this college football recruiting scandal continues to grow. I am not a fan of this scandal, and I've actually gone and looked at all of the legalities here, okay? I've gone and looked at all the legalities, and I don't think that the FBI has a very good case here, guys. I understand that they're trying to charge these guys with fraud. I think they could probably have a better case on tax evasion. I don't understand the fraud charges here. I don't understand what's going on and why that makes sense. I don't understand why that makes sense at all. I think this is a tenuous legal theory that they are trying to catch people on. Now, they clearly have got people violating NCAA rules. But NCAA rules are not laws. You don't go to jail for violating NCAA rules. You're just not allowed to play NCAA sports. So certainly coaches can get fired for violating NCAA rules. But I don't understand what they have done that violates federal law, and I certainly don't understand why the FBI needed to be involved for 3 years. Here's another big question for you. What are the schools going to do to Adidas and Nike and Under Armour and all these other companies? If this was a booster who was doing all this, they would be excluded from having any contact with NCAA member institutions for the rest of their lives, right? Think about that. So are they going to still allow Nike and Adidas and Under Armour and Reebok to have all of these relationships with the schools? I think it shows you how much of an unbelievable crap like shamateurism is, how fake the NCAA is. Like, yeah, every school will have to switch to Russell Athletic or to Big Baller Brand. Maybe this is a big move for Big Baller Brand. They haven't been paying anybody. Maybe they're going to take over the universe here now. But that is actually pretty entertaining to think about. What in the world are they going to do to be able to respond in this kind of situation? I don't know the answer, but I know it's a tremendous mess, and I know there isn't that much going on here. Again, I don't know what the fraud element associated with this actually means. I think they're going to have a hard time getting convictions, and maybe British Knights is going to come back, maybe LA Gear, maybe the Big Baller Brand, could be huge for BK. Could be huge for BK and LA Gear. Russell Athletic, there's a great line from Paul Johnson saying this is the first time I've ever been glad that we had the Russell Athletic contract. That was actually pretty funny. And props to good old Paul Johnson for thinking about that. All right, maybe it's good for Outkick. Maybe Umbro's going to come back. Maybe Outkick's going to get its own brand. I appreciate all of you. Thank you for spending your Thursday afternoon with me. Tomorrow, we are scheduled on Outkick the Show to have a massive guest. Massive guest scheduled to be in person with me tomorrow on Outkick the Show right around 12:30, and it should be a lot of fun. So massive guest in person with me on Outkick the Show tomorrow. Let me know. You can make your guesses. as to who it's going to be. Massive guest. Should be a lot of fun. I will see you guys. Serious. We should be back full show on Monday, I'm told. I appreciate all of you. Thank you for coming to hang with me. I'm Clay Travis. This has been Outkick the Show.